All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a case file, a literary detective story that's been unfolding for 2,000 years. We're going to piece together the clues to solve one of history's most fascinating puzzles, how the first three Gospels of the New Testament were actually written. So let's just dive right in. The central mystery here is what scholars call the Synoptic Problem. You've got three accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that often tell the exact same stories, sometimes even using the exact same Greek words. But then out of nowhere, they'll diverge in ways that are just baffling. It's this wild combination of incredible similarity and stark difference that has everyone asking the big question: who was copying whom? Okay, so take a look at this. This is a simplified example showing the story of Jesus healing a man with leprosy. In Matthew, the text says, immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Luke says the leprosy left him, but Mark seems to kind of blend elements from both. Now, are these huge changes? No, but they are incredibly specific. It's almost like you have three witnesses to the same event, and they all use slightly different but overlapping phrases. That's the mystery we've got to solve. So our investigation is going to start with the Gospel of Matthew, which we can think of as the architect's blueprint. For centuries, the common thinking was that Matthew wrote first, providing the foundational structure. And when you really look closely at the Greek text, you start to see these hidden scars of translation that suggest he was working from an even earlier document. And this is where it gets really interesting. You see, Matthew's writing style shifts, and it shifts dramatically. When he's telling the story, his Greek is flowing, it's complex. But when he quotes Jesus' long sermons, like the Beatitudes, the style suddenly becomes blocky, repetitive, and just full of Semitic sentence structures. It's almost like he literally stops writing and starts cutting and pasting from a totally different, pre-existing sacred text that was originally in another language. So these linguistic scars, they have a name. They're called Semitisms. Basically, they're phrases or grammatical structures that sound perfectly normal in a language like Hebrew or Aramaic, but they're pretty awkward in Greek. They're like linguistic fingerprints left behind at the crime scene, and they point directly to an original Aramaic document that the author of Matthew was translating. They're a dead giveaway. And this is a perfect example. In Aramaic, Jesus makes this really clever pun. You are Kepha, which means rock, and on this Kepha or rock, it works perfectly. But when you translate it into Greek, you have to change the word for rock to a feminine noun, Petra, to make it different from the male name Petros. The wordplay gets clunky, it just doesn't land the same way. The fact that the perfect pun only works in Aramaic, that is a massive clue to the original language of the saying. Okay, so let's shift gears and look at Luke, the polished historian. His Greek is some of the best in the entire New Testament. He basically tells us right up front that he did his homework and researched other accounts. But the linguistic evidence, it shows he was also translating his own Aramaic sources. And, get this, in one case it looks like he made a really fascinating mistake. So, you've got this passage, right? It's all about ritual purity. Matthew's Jesus says to clean the inside of the cup, which makes perfect sense in context. But in Luke's parallel version, Jesus says to give as alms those things that are within. In the middle of a discussion about washing dishes, why would he suddenly start talking about giving to charity? It makes zero sense in Greek. It's a total non sequitur. The solution to this puzzle isn't some deep theological difference. It's much simpler than that. It's probably a translation error. The whole mystery just unlocks when you look at two nearly identical words in the original Aramaic. Okay, so in Aramaic, the word for cleanse is daki. The word for give alms is zaki. I mean, they look and sound almost exactly the same. And this is the smoking gun. Matthew's translator correctly read the word as daki, cleanse. But Luke, or his source translator, seems to have misread that same Aramaic word as zaki, give alms. I mean, that is just incredibly powerful evidence that Luke wasn't just copying Matthew's polished Greek. No way. He had to be working from his own Aramaic source and just made a different translation choice. All right, so that brings us to our third gospel, Mark. His gospel is short, it's fast-paced, and it's missing all those long translated sermons you see in Matthew and Luke. But it's packed with something else entirely. Raw, unfiltered eyewitness texture. It feels like you're reading a reporter's notebook. Mark includes these vivid, seemingly useless details. But are they useless? When Jesus feeds the 5,000, the grass isn't just grass. It's green grass. A tiny detail, sure, but it places the event in the springtime. When Jesus is asleep in the boat, he's asleep on a cushion in the stern. That's the specific memory of a fisherman who owned that boat. He even includes intimate nicknames like Boanerges, A summarizer, someone just trying to get the facts down, would cut all of this stuff to save space. But an eyewitness, someone like the Apostle Peter, he'd remember those details for the rest of his life. And Mark does something else that's totally unique. At these moments of super high emotion, he doesn't translate, he just preserves the actual sound of Jesus' Aramaic voice. Like here, when he raises a young girl. Or here, when he heals a deaf man. This technique gives his account this raw sense of immediacy that the other Gospels just don't have. It's like he's not just telling you what happened, he's making sure you hear it. And again, in Jesus' most personal, raw moment of prayer, Mark gives us the original Aramaic. You see, all these moments suggest his main source wasn't just a document he was translating, like Matthew's source was. It was a person's living memory. He wasn't transcribing a scroll, he was recording a voice. Okay, so let's put all the pieces on the table. When we assemble all these linguistic clues, Matthew's translation scars, Luke's little Aramaic typo, and Mark's incredible eyewitness texture, a clear and really compelling picture emerges of how these three incredible documents were created. First up, you have Matthew the Apostle. We'll call him the architect. He records Jesus' teachings, the logia, in Aramaic. This is the bedrock. Second, you have Luke the researcher, who uses Matthew's work, but also translates his own Aramaic sources, adding new stories. And finally, you get Mark the interpreter, who creates a fast-paced summary, cutting the long sermons, but injecting it with the vivid, unfiltered, living memory of the Apostle Peter. And this is what solves the puzzle. You realize Matthew gave us the words of Jesus, but it was Mark, guided by Peter, who gave us the voice and the heartbeat. And this, right here, is why all of this literary detective work actually matters. It transforms these texts from just being three similar biographies into this rich tapestry woven from completely different threads. You've got the foundational account from an apostle, the careful research of a historian, and the raw, personal memory of Jesus' closest friend. It doesn't just solve a puzzle, it brings us so much closer to the very real, very distinct voices that first told this incredible story.